Cool. Not touching anything. Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Nice to be here again. My name is Dressler. I'm a user researcher at Spotify. I joined them fairly recently, so please apologize if not the whole presentation is just like packed with insights from Spotify. I'm just arriving there basically. But what I will be talking about is kind of a framework for decision making that we've used at my old job at ShopDirect, which is a UK retailer, and also use at Spotify. And I'll give a couple of examples from both ShopDirect and Spotify. So if you're here for Spotify, I hope you get kind of your share. So one thing, how many of you were here last year? Okay, that's only a couple. So one theme that we were talking about last year quite a lot was failure. And it was a really, really interesting discussion going because there are a couple of people like Alex Hunter. Oh, this is really dark. Alex Hunter, who was kind of really, really passionate about that this whole idea of you have to fail to succeed is going too far. And obviously there were a lot of other people kind of reiterating all these important and famous quotes from people who say basically, you know, if you do anything, you have to fail. Don't look too much at your successes, but look at when, how, and if you fail. So one other quote I want to kind of give, because I felt it might be a nice idea to kind of advance the discussion a bit, is this quote by Garrett Camp. And so he's basically saying, anything we design, we're going to test and iterate. Lean up startup style, just because something looks good doesn't mean it's actually working. This data-driven approach gives us more enhanced resolution on how the product is behaving and succeeding, compared, and that's the important part, compared to what a typical startup would do. So he thinks, and I guess he kind of knows a bit of what he's talking about, he thinks startups are not doing that enough. And if you read a bit between the lines, testing and iterating doesn't mean it's actually working. All of that kind of has the possibility of failure rooted in it. So I said that I'm going to present kind of a framework for decision making, which is largely based on failure. And I kind of made up a couple of nice mental pictures. You probably not know what I mean by a thumb of a Caesar right now, but I hope you will at the end of this presentation. And they're kind of meant as mental images, so you can kind of keep them in mind a bit more, and it's not too dry. And the main point of this is obviously that you want to fail right. I mean, the question can't really be whether you want to fail or not, because everyone who's like getting anything significant done is embracing failure as a means of decision making. So if you look at Google, at Netflix, at Amazon, at Spotify, all of them are heavily embracing a culture where you can fail, and sometimes where you even try to fail and provoke to fail. So the first kind of key message is that if you're going to fail, you want to fail like this. So it might look pretty stupid, and obviously it's kind of not a nice thing, but if you think about it, it's fairly reasonable, because that's a low-cost failure. You know, there's no massive damage being done. It can be kind of repaired fairly quickly. The guy up here, he'll probably like do a better job next time, because it's kind of, you know, easy to kind of adjust. So that's kind of failure. That's quite okay, actually. Or like I did myself this morning, when you kind of have a typo in your business card. You don't want to fail like this, because that's not kind of, you don't come back from that failure. That's failure that you don't learn anything from. Only the other guys learn from it. All you'll get is a Darwin Award. So don't do that. So while I'm kind of explaining these kind of three elements of a good failing culture, really, I'm going through a couple of through one example actually from ShopDirect, my last employer in the UK. And even though those guys weren't a startup, we were dealing a lot with startups, because we were like a company that's making the transition to the digital world from being a catalog business, and they're kind of very, very interested in getting kind of making headway in the digital space. And we were, in this particular case, we were dealing with a startup called Simagine, and that's a really, really, really interesting piece of technology. It's trackerless 3D augmented reality on your. So what you're doing is you get your iPad, and you open this app, and then without kind of printing anything, you can kind of just move around the room. It will scan the room automatically. It will recognize the room for what it is, and then it will kind of, so you can see like, you know, this black chair is not actually here. Really, really, really impressive technology. And when we showed that to our customers, like, they were really, really impressed as well. So they like saying, it's great, I would definitely use it. One person who said, like, I have failed with these technologies in the past, but this feels so good, I definitely would use it again. So that's really, really cool, right? The problem is when we put it actually into the hands of our customers and we ask them, like in user testing, could you kind of just have a go? Like, this kind of stuff happened. So that's a chair on a desk if you can't see it properly. So yeah, and I mean, how can you class that other than a fail? And what a lot of companies would do, and what we might have done in the couple of years back is, you just kind of, you kill the project. You're not trying to not talk about it anymore. You kind of, fake your numbers a bit, and then everything looks good again. But that's actually not the way to go anymore, and that's not the way the ShopDirect handles things anymore. That's not the way Spotify handles things, and I think that's probably not a good way to deal with failure at all. So I'm going to the first kind of concept. The first concept is the thumb of Caesar. And the reason why I chose this name for that is that the thumb of Caesar can just go up or down. That's kind of the kind of one important attribute of that. You definitely know whether you've succeeded or failed after this, because there is no middle ground. This is the starting position, and then it goes up or down. And that's kind of the first really important thing that you kind of want to get clear about any kind of failure is it actually failure? Because it's very easy to say, like the growth numbers, they didn't reach our target, fair enough, but we have this kind of whale users who really spend a lot, so kind of that metric looks okay. So maybe it's actually wasn't a bad change after all. You don't know if what you've done is actually successful if you're not really, really strict about that. And the most successful progress system in the world, in the history of the planet, actually is evolution, of course. By the way, if you're like a hardcore creationist, this might be a good time to catch a coffee or something. But evolution works mainly by kind of having this super heavy criterion of, are the genes passed on to the next generation? Yep, then you succeed, or not, and then you fail. And that's kind of, it's obviously a very long process, but without it, we wouldn't be here. A couple of other examples are metrics in an A/B test. So A/B tests are obviously really, really solid, and kind of the mainstream example for this is version A better or not as the competitor? And you'll always get like yes or no. And if it's kind of not better, so you can also say like, it's better, it's equal, or it's worse. But if you ask the question like, is it better, then you will just get a yes or no. So that's kind of, I think that qualifies. Completion rates in user testing, so that's what we do when we kind of invite users to a user experience lab or just to a room and kind of give them new technology, see if they can use it or not. And if we don't listen to what they say at that stage, that doesn't, we're just like la la la. We look at if people can do what we previously defined as our goal. Can they complete the basic actions? If they say they hate it or they love it, doesn't matter. But you can apply that really to any measurable goal. So any kind of business metric, any kind of goal, like I could look, like I want minimum 3 questions at the end of this talk, and that's my metric. And if I get 2, that's a fail. So it's really not about kind of, it's not about how big the failure will be or anything. It's just about making really sure you kind of know whether you're achieving what you want to achieve or not. And I got a nice quote from Ron Kohavi, who's the lead of the experimentation team at Bing. So he's running all the A/B tests there. And you may think of Bing what you want, but really good guy. So he's saying like they measure 500 metrics on any given A/B test, and the shipping decision, so whether they like ship the feature or not, is based on 3. And that just shows you how important this kind of whole focus is for keeping actually like kind of your business in line. Because if you're looking like, yeah, well, our main metrics are not down, but this metric is up and stuff, and you kind of, it's very easy to fool yourself into thinking, it's not actually that worse. We don't have to kind of take any lessons from this. Let's just continue. So overall, 0.6% of all their data actually influences their decision. So what it's with the rest of that? That will be the interesting part. We'll talk about that in a minute. Back to our example. In the case of this kind of virtual reality tool, our goal was, as is always when we get like new technology on board, is we want that every of the users we tested on can do the basic functionality. It doesn't mean they can struggle. It doesn't mean they have to kind of like, be super quick about it. It just means if we give this into the hand of a user, one of our customers, and we ask them like, make sure that chair appears like wherever you want it, like compared next to the red chair, for example, and they cannot do that without us helping them, then that's a fail, right? And in our first measurement, not a single user could actually do the basic features. So that's kind of as clear as it gets. And but that's also as far as we go here. You know, at this point, we're not looking into why is this happening or kind of what are the users saying, how are they behaving. We're not interested in that yet. So it's all about knowing that you failed. That's at this point, number one, you want to know that you failed. And that has to be like a really, really clear yes or no answer. It has to be by eliminating ideas, prototypes, hypotheses, whatever you kind of want to put up for a test. And it's really important that your criterion, so the criterion you measure it against, is really solid. Because, for example, if you're in e-commerce, what you're kind of usually most interested in is conversion, right? How many people that hit your website actually buy something from you? But if that's kind of your overall criterion, you make all your decisions based on pass or failure in that space, then you might, for example, miss out on the long-time value of your customers. So, you know, like all the travel websites, Ryanair, etc., you put a lot of crap in the face of your customers, so they will convert very good, but they might hate the experience and not return later. And if you're not measuring that, and if that's not one of your basic metrics, then you might have a long-term problem. So really, really think about that. And the overall gist of this first element, the thumb of Caesar, is you'll learn one thing, or maybe two, but that for sure. And that's a really important piece about this. So what about all the rest of the information? Because if you're doing this kind of test, your users are saying stuff to you, you observe them, etc., etc. So what's happening with all that data? And that's all going into what I call a flight recorder. And this is a fun fact, but there was a guy called David Warren in the 1950s who had this idea after a couple of jets had crashed and no one knew why, which is not good. He had the kind of idea of like, let's create a box that kind of records the pilot's voice, that's kind of measuring all this kind of flight data. So maybe we can figure out what's happening. And at that time, no one was really interested in that idea, so no one kind of funded it. And like right now, as we're speaking, like there are an estimated $60 million spent on finding a single one of these boxes, because right now we have no idea what happened to that flight, right? So as you can see from that, it's all about kind of gathering as much data as you can, a varied, rich pool of data. It doesn't immediately have to answer you any questions. That we're getting to that later. But it's all about knowing, kind of having an idea of what's happening, how you fail, basically. And games are doing that really, really well. If you're playing a game, so let's pick the Angry Birds example. Most people will be familiar with that. Like, since you're obviously failing in that example, you instantly have kind of audio-visual feedback on how you did, right? Like what happened. So you can see the trajectory that shows you kind of, that's how the kind of curve went. You'll have an instant kind of memory of all the steps that led up to that event. So you have a lot of like fuzzy, rich data. You might not instantly kind of be able to link that to reason. You might not tell you actually if you fail or not, but it tells you what's happening. So very, very descriptive. And translate that back into like the kind of user testing, business context. The contrast is really bad on that, unfortunately. So that's kind of user testing. So what we do there is we record what the users are saying, we record what they're doing, we can ask them live. So it's like kind of on-demand live data, which is really cool. It's, for example, like just a heat map of how people scroll the website on their phones. So it doesn't really tell you, whatever goal you had. This doesn't give you an answer because it's not a number. It's nothing like hard. But from looking at it, you kind of have an idea of what's happening. This, by the way, is from a Polish startup called Use It Better. They have a tool that's really, really, really good for this kind of stuff, just gathering like loads of data. So check them out if you're kind of interested in that. And again, Ron Kohavi, 500 metrics, 3 influence the shipping decision. That means that 99.4%, so the all rest, is used for investigation. And that shows you how important that is, because if an A/B test failed, and that happens like at ShopDirect, that happened loads of times, at Spotify that happens, you have an A/B test that failed, everyone was like completely on board that it surely would be a success, and then it failed, and you have no idea why. And that's not good, right? Because you will make kind of no progress whatsoever, or you have to launch an investigation afterwards, which just makes it longer and more laborious. back to the example. So in here, obviously, as I said, live on-demand data feed. In this case, it was user testing. We observed this kind of two interesting facts. So users were aiming higher than they should, because what the app was doing is kind of you had to aim at the base of where you wanted the furniture to appear. So if I wanted to kind of have this appear, I need to aim at that. But users were aiming higher. And they were also kind of dragging the items around in unexpected ways. So that we didn't really kind of understand that instantly. But that was kind of the observation, and that's important at this stage. You don't need to understand it. You just gather. It's all about, to just wrap this up, about how it failed, how you failed. It's about having loads of data. It's about generating ideas, because that's what's. If you don't have a clear hypothesis when you're going into that, and you just have this huge data pool, you can look at it and you can just have a couple of ideas of what might be happening. Really don't confuse that with hard evidence. That's what the thumb is for. And the good thing is there's no need to monitor it all the times, right? A flight recorder in an airplane just becomes interesting when something bad happens. And that's the last one in the trinity of decision-making elements. It's a big, big, big blackboard. And what I mean with this kind of mental image is that you need a space where you gather all this data that you just figured out. You gather all the thumb up, thumb down decisions that you kind of saw. You put it all on that massive blackboard, and then you can kind of start thinking about what's happening there. You know, what are the relations between the elements? Why is stuff happening? So you want to build theories. You want to understand what is the system doing that I'm trying to observe here. And then just giving you a couple of examples. So if you're interested, like, why does it look good? That's design theory. There's like books and books and books about why do people think things look good. There are all these theories. Why do users do X, Y, Z? You know, you can look into psychology and behavioral science and see all the theories that scientists have made up over the years and kind of get an idea of what's happening. Or like more the business context that I'm not that familiar with. But if you have do you have a product market fit? Why do you have it? Why don't you have it? You know, look at market models and all this kind of stuff. So it's about understanding the why, really. And going back to the example, so our theories were, A, users aim too high, that's what we observed, because they have a mental image of a 2D overlay rather than a 3D environment. So users were thinking in terms of, oh yeah, this is kind of picture over picture. That's why they were aiming at where they wanted kind of the center of the item to appear. They didn't have the concept of a virtual three-dimensional room. We also thought, okay, maybe all the users are not familiar with 3D technology. You know, like you and I, we grew up with kind of, you know, video games. You know how 3D behaves, that you have to drag, that there's depth in the room. These older users don't. Then you might ask yourself, hey, okay, so the next step is just let's build a tutorial. But then again, we know that many users skip tutorials. And also, it's really, really crucial for a tool like that that's new to people to work instantly. You know, you don't want to, if you introduce new technology to people that they might not understand how crucial it is for them, you don't want to put them through a lot of work. So the test hypothesis, and that's the second stage of the blackboard. After you have your theory, which is like a big idea of like a couple of relations, you want to test specific parts of that. In this part, we tested, okay, let's mask part of the image. I'll show you a picture in a second. Because that will nudge people to aim lower without kind of any need of grasping the concept. It looked like this. So what happened is that the guys from Simagine came up with this kind of, they graded this out. You can still kind of see the background behind that, but it's kind of a bit opaque. And users were now, no, I'm not going to tell you the results yet, sorry. So that's a hypothesis, and that's easy to, again, pass-fail, right? Now we're back to Caesar and all that. Now we have an output of all this kind of data mess that we can test again, and that is super important. Because time and time again, you see that designers and engineers, they go like, oh yeah, of course I understand why that is because of X, Y, Z, and then they make fixes for all of that, and then they test it, and oh yeah, it works, and then they're like, okay, so my theory was right. But they can't say that because they didn't check the factors in kind of, or for themselves. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Cool, so it's sum up, it's now why you failed. Now, so we got if you failed, that's the thumb. We got how you failed, that's the flight recorder, and we know why we're failing. So that's kind of all we need really to make progress and to learn from this. Two really important notes is that's something that why science as a system is so successful. One big reason is that theories should rival one another. So it's very easy to come up with one theory for something you see, and then you're like, yeah, okay, that's probably it. Cool, awesome. But if you have a couple of theories, then you can become smarter with testing them against each other. So you're like, okay, but if it's actually users not understanding that, maybe this kind of fade out box will work. But what if instead, I don't know, it's kind of something about that they think it's not measured, that they have like the idea it's measuring the center instead of in the ground, whatever. Then you can make up a hypothesis that is unique to the one idea, but not to the others. That's how science works, right? And then you build your yes/no hypotheses. And really important is after you get your feedback, and I'll show that in this kind of diagram a little bit. After you get your yes or no from the test that you're doing, that goes back into your theory, because now you know something. Now you know, okay, this worked, this didn't work, that validates or invalidates my hypothesis, and now I have to rethink my theory, right? And then you get obviously kind of your whole kind of constant data feeds that are going into this that you just kind of need to observe all the time and make sure, like, what else can I come up with, especially if you're getting stuck. So, after a few iterations, thumb of Caesar, 100% of users could use all the basic features. So, and that was obviously because we went a couple of times through this process. I think when we kind of introduced this kind of fade-out box, after that, like 80% of users could use the tool. There was still a couple of other issues left. But then we iterated again, and then we saw like 100% success rate. And yeah, so that's kind of when we said, cool, this is done. Now we can move into A/B testing and test this against kind of, massive commercial metrics. So I got 4 minutes left. That's enough for my Spotify example. So as you might know, Spotify got a massive redesign it was, happy about that even? Funny story actually, that when I went for my interview with Spotify, I was kind of, this was still the reality. And I was like, okay, cool. If they ask me anything like examples of what I would kind of change about Spotify, what I would want to research, I had prepared like loads about like, this kind of the cross-channel experience is not good, everything is kind of really, really inconsistent, blah, blah, blah. The day I woke up in my hotel to go to the interview at Spotify, this was launched, which was a bit unfortunate, but it worked anyways, apparently. Okay, changing the sequence a little bit. Because for this design, we started kind of with the ideas, with the theories behind it. And the 3 theories, or the 3 parts of the theory, however you want to put it, were 1, the design of Spotify is lacking. Because, beats, etc., they're all better. Number 2, why should we care? Because design is an important factor in attracting users, in keeping users, and kind of, getting good press, etc., etc. And 3, that's really not readable. A good design results from, and this just says, enter your design theory. Whatever you, as a designer, think makes good design, just that's kind of what you believe. Maybe brand principles, maybe design principles, whatever, really. So to test that, the guys built 4 different versions of the Spotify layout. This is the one that was in place. This one was called flat white, flat gray, and this was called different, which is the one that you probably all recognize by now. Got it? Cool. So what was kind of the interesting piece here to find out? We wanted to know whether users will prefer one of the 4 ones. Because if they were kind of indifferent, then what would be the point of kind of investing millions and millions and whatever into kind of making this big change? Number 2 was the winning design, so whichever users will prefer, will A, boost the brand perception, because that was the point of the whole exercise, and also make users happy, obviously. And number 3, and that's really, really important, because if you remember, I talked about focusing and making sure what metrics you're measuring and whatnot. Redesign will not hurt any commercial metric. That means we were not looking for any kind of gains for like retention going up or for acquisition going up instantly. It was all about doing the upper 2 things, make brand perception and the users' kind of satisfaction go up without hurting the business. And first of all, users, will prefer one design, thumb up, because we asked them which of the 4 designs would you prefer in a survey, and like massively clear winner both in US and Germany, completely on par. 60% of people preferred the new design. or the black design, which back then wasn't the new design. Second of all, and again, this is not good to read. So up here we get the brand perception. So like, we think the new design is like kind of communicates, be alive, do less, all these kind of Spotify principles. And in terms of look and feel attributes, the design looks better. Social was actually the only one that went down. Originality, whatever. Important note, all the white arrows actually are non-significant. So that's where it gets statistical. Because if you're making these kind of comparisons, it's important that you're kind of obviously a bit on top of, depending on what you're doing, but if you're measuring a couple of thousand users or million users against a couple of million users, then if it's just like two users in difference, that's obviously statistically not significant. It might just be chance. So you want to kind of know a little bit about that. But that's only if you're going for the A/B testing and making it really complicated. Yeah, satisfaction also went up, desktop and web player. So yep, thumb up for that. And now what did the A/B testing do? Were our metrics heard or not? No change in everything. User activation didn't change, user retention didn't change, and the number of songs played, really important metric for us, also didn't change. So that's good in this case, right? That's again, thumb up, thumb down. You need to know in advance what you want, what you're looking for, what concept are you trying to validate and prove. And I think this is one of my last slides. The flight recorder, what did that say? So, Jesus Christ, the contrast. So first one is TechCrunch, second one is Fast Co-Design, and Gizmodo. So Gizmodo, they were all kind of really happy. Obviously, redesign might have just eliminated the only advantage Spotify's competitors had left. That feels good if you read that. But again, it's just data. It's not, that was not what we measured. That was not something that, because there might be other people who say, I think it's shit. But this is just data that you kind of take in, you gather it, and then you can dig in and see if anything any new theories or anything comes out of it. So raving press reviews, great ratings, and importantly, in the forums like user comments, really, really, really happy with it. And an important thing, because I was talking about, or this talk is called building a culture. Never stop with this kind of approach. Always keep experimenting. Don't go for okay, yeah, we found out this one thing, now let's kind of just run down that road. Make sure you always keep asking yourself these questions, am I failing or not? Why am I failing and what's happening overall? And be really, really vigilant and kind of alert to that. Yeah, just to sum it up, provoke failure within a rigid testing process. So provoke failure. It's not about failing. Obviously, no one wants to fail, but don't treat it as a bad thing. Provoke it. Make sure that you you put yourself out there. Because if you're failing early on with an idea or with a concept, that doesn't hurt that much. Of course, it's never nice. But it's better, like with this virtual reality tool we tested, to fail early with minimal investment. It's better than to fail in a massive launch. In case any of you know the 1 billion mistake from Walmart? No? So they asked a couple of customers in their stores, would you like the stores to be less cluttered, more tidy? And the customer said, yeah, of course, awesome. So they reorganized all their stores and lost about $1 billion in sales based on that, because sales went dramatically down. And that's because they didn't properly test it. They just kind of asked two people, go ahead, change everything, don't have a theory or a rigid hypothesis testing behind that, do small sample tests, etc. So it didn't work out for them. And then just the 3 points I tried to iterate. Build theories and hypotheses on your blackboard, test for success fail with your thumb, and have a flight recorder in place just to record as much as you can. After this talk, I'll try to talk to as many of you as possible just to get a feel for kind of what you thought. Because if I'm ending this talk and I'm getting not a single question, then I'll kind of want to have an idea of why. Did the talk suck? Did you kind of just didn't think the topic was interesting, or did you expect something else? So that's really important to do that. And with that, I'm opening the floor to questions. Little nice fail that I did today. So if you want to email me, take the right one, not the one. Thank you.
Any questions?
Number one, awesome. Good.
Just one.
Hi, my name is Bartek.
Hi.
I hear this question a lot, so I'm just interested how you will answer it. Testing is quite expensive, and for a young startup, new project, it's very difficult to do this whole road you showed, like going through, like looking how it goes and then testing A/B, stuff like that. When you are small, you cannot afford to have like 4 different layouts because it's like 4 times more job. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, if you look at Spotify, they didn't test that until like way into their success story. So obviously, like focus on the stuff that's really crucial to you. Spotify never considered design as crucial element until kind of recently. So that's kind of one thing to go about it. And number B is obviously you don't have to kind of build these massive, gigantic tests where you kind of do that. For Spotify now, it's very easy to create that. So if you're testing as an early stage startup, test obviously on stuff that's easy for you. And that's one thing where you can get really creative. Because obviously you can't always build a massive set of prototypes and that have full functionality. But what you can do is you can fake it, for example. You can fake different test ideas. You can, and you can do it really small scale. You can go around and ask people about an idea and just see how many kind of ideas come back to you that you can't kind of really push back on. Or what you can do is most people think that for A/B testing you need hundreds of thousands of users. You can test A/B test with a couple of 100 users. But you will obviously then only learn about big differences. With 500 users, if you A/B test 500 versus 500, you won't learn whether the one is like 2% better than the other, but you will learn if the other is like 30% better. So yeah, hope that.
Okay, thank you very much for a great lecture. A big applause again, please.
Thank you.